Welcome again, guys. Welcome again. Welcome to my channel, everyone. Good to see you again. Welcome and thank you all so much for coming into the channel. I sincerely appreciate you. Now, this afternoon, this evening, we are going to be continuing with the reading of The Guardian, written by Nicholas Sparks. For those of you who have been on the journey with me so far, I hope you all have been enjoying the reading of this book as much as I have been enjoying bringing it to you. Now we have gotten to the spicy part of the book. Lord, it's so spicy. Let me drink a little bit of water here because the book has become so spicy. Julie and Mike have Julie and Mike have taken their relationship to another level. And then there is the guy, Richard. Richard seems to be up to no good. I haven't yet figured out exactly what he's going to do, but I see where it seems like he is going to do something. It seems like he's going to do something. I'm not sure what it is, but it is clear that he's watching Julie. He's keeping tabs on her. He's creating circumstances to make her to ensure that he sees her. And these circumstances that he creates might not work out too well for Julie. And also with him and his confessions of the terrible person that he is, it makes me worry about Julie and being in his presence. I got to be done about that Richard. That Richard is out of control. But we are going to be continuing with the reading. We are now on to chapter 25 of the book. So without further ado, without much chattering, we are going to continue. We're going to finish reading this book and about two or three others before the year is out. So let us begin. Yesterday, Julie and Mike did the deed. So today we're gonna see what happens. The Guardian by Nicholas Sparks, chapter 25. It sounds to me like everything's going great, Emma said on Saturday. Earlier that day, Earlier that day, Mike and Julie had met Henry and Emma at the boat launch on Harker's Island. They had loaded the boat with coolers of food and beer, sunscreen, towels, hats, tubs of ice, enough fishing gear to hook anything that might happen to cross the stern, including Moby Dick, Orca, and Jaws himself. By mid-morning, in the sound near Cape Lookout, Mike and Henry were standing next to each other, reels in hand, engaged in a competition that could only be described as profoundly juvenile. Every time either one of them caught a fish, he'd get to shake a bottle of beer and point it at the other. Epi, what's up? How are you doing? Good to see you. Welcome. One of the tubs was already filled with enough mackerel and flounder to feed a wandering army of starving seals, and both men had removed their bear-soaked shirts and hung them on the rail to dry. Julie and Emma were sitting in small lawn chairs near the cabin, acting a little more grown up. The sun beat down on them steadily. Because it wasn't yet summer, the humidity was bearable. It is, Julie agreed. Better than great, actually. This last week makes me wonder what I was so afraid of all this time. The way she said it made Emma pause. But, but what? There's something bothering you, isn't there? Is it that obvious? No, but it doesn't need to be obvious. I've known you long enough to recognize the signs. So what is it? Something to do with Mike? No, not at all. Do you love him? Yeah, I do. Then, what is it? Julie cautiously set her gear on the deck. I've been getting some strange phone calls lately. From whom? I don't know. No one ever says anything on the other end. Heavy breathers? No, not even that. No sound at all. And you don't know who they are from? No. When I dialed star 69, the recording said it was a private number. So I called the phone company. All they can tell me is that the calls are coming from a cellular phone, but the number isn't registered, so they can't trace it. How is that possible? I have no idea. They explained it, but I wasn't really listening. After they said they couldn't help me, I sort of tuned out. Do you have an idea who they might be from? Julie turned and watched my cast line again. I think it might be Richard. I can prove it, but it's just a feel. I can't prove it, but if anyone knew besides him, and I don't know. I just think he's the one. The way he acted when I told him it was over, the way he keeps popping into my life. What do you mean? Well, it's just little salon for another haircut. And whenever we do see each other, it's like he's trying to find out how. Emma looked at her. What does Mike think? I don't know. I haven't told him yet. Why not? Julie shrugged. What's he going to do? Go after the guy? Like I said, I don't even know for sure that Richard's the one who's calling. Well, how many calls have there been? Julie closed her eyes for a moment. Well, on Wednesday, there were 20 messages on the machine. Emma sat up straight. Oh my God! Have you told the police about this? No, Julie said. It wasn't until then that I even admitted what was happening. I guess I was just hoping that it was a mistake of some kind, like some sort of computer malfunction with the phone company. I was just hoping it would stop, and maybe it has. My phone hasn't rung at all the last 2 days. Emma reached for Julie's hand. People like that don't stop. You read about this kind of stuff in the papers all the time. Ex-boyfriend wanders in and settles the score. This is talking. This is talker kind of stuff. Don't you realize that? Of course I do. And I've thought about it. But then again, what am I going to say to the police? I can't prove it's Richard calling, and neither can the phone company. He hasn't threatened me. I haven't seen his car parked on my street or near the salon. He hasn't been he hasn't been anything but polite when we do run into each other. And even then, there have always been other people around. All he'd have to do is deny it. She made the point like a lawyer summing up a case. And besides, she said, like I told you, I don't know for sure that it's him. It could be Bob, for all I know, or someone I don't even know. Emma watched her before squeezing her hand. But you are 99% sure it's Richard. After a moment, Julie nodded. And no calls last night or the night before when Mike was there? No, it was quiet. I guess he stopped. Emma frowned, thinking about it. Scary. It gives me the creeps just thinking about it. Me too. So what are you going to do? Julie shook her head. I have no idea. An hour later, Julie was standing at the bow when she felt Mike slip his arms around her and nuzzle her neck. She leaned into his grip, feeling strangely comforted as he moved to stand beside her. Hey there, she said. Hi. You look a little confused. You look lonely. You look lonely up there. No, just enjoying the breeze. I was getting kind of hot in the sun. Me too. I think I got sunburned. The bear must have washed off my sunscreen. So did you win? I don't want to brag, but let's just say he got a lot more sun than I did. She smiled. So what's Henry doing now? Probably pouting. She glanced behind her. Henry was leaning over the side, beer can in hand, filling it with sea water. When he saw Julie looking, he stood and brought a finger to his lips, begging her to be silent. So, are you ready for tonight? She asked. At the clipper? Yeah, I knew most of the songs already. What are you gonna wear? Probably just jeans this time. I think it's getting a little old to dress like a kid. And you are just realizing that? Sometimes it takes me a while, you know. She leaned into him. Like with me? Yeah, like with you too. In the distance, assorted boats had dropped anchor near the beach at Cape Lookout. On the first warm weekend of the year, it was crowded with families. Kids splashed and shrieked in the water. Parents sprawled on towels. Behind the crowd, the lighthouse rose 80 feet in the air, painted white with black diamonds. It looked like a folded checkerboard standing on end. You've been kind of quiet today, Mike said, squeezing her. Well, I was just thinking about something Emma said. No, just the opposite. It's something I mentioned to her. Mike could feel the wisps of her hair as they feathered his face. Do you want to talk about it? Julie took a deep breath before recounting the things she had told Emma. As he listened, Mike's expressions shifted from confusion to concern, then finally to anger. When she was finished, he reached for her hand and turned her around. So you think it was him when I answered the phone that night? I don't know. Why didn't you tell me about this before? There wasn't anything to tell. Not until a couple of days ago, anyway. Mike glanced away, frowning, then looked back at Julie. Well, if it happens again, I'm going to put a stop to it. Julie seemed to study him, then slowly broke into a smile. You have that sexy look in your eyes again. Don't try to change the subject. This is serious. Remember what we talked about in Tizzes? Yeah, she said, I remember. Her voice was flat. It's just the way I deal with things when I'm upset. Try to joke my way out of things. Old habit, you know. After a long moment, Mike put his arms around her again. Don't worry, he said. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Lunch was an informal affair, sandwiches and chips, and a deli container of potato salad. Having told Mike and Emma, and with a Having told Mike and Emma, she drew some comfort from the fact that both had taken what was happening as seriously as she did. She even began to relax and let herself have fun, though she could see in Mike's face that he hadn't forgotten what she had said. Mike was Mike, and he could stay serious for only so long, especially with Henry egging him on. At one point, Henry offered Mike the beer he had filled earlier, and Mike took a drink before choking in mid-swallow and spraying it overboard. Henry roared, and Emma giggled. And after Mike whipped his and after Mike wiped his chin, he laughed as well. But he didn't forget. Later, he grabbed a flounder and used it to flavor one of Mike's sandwiches by running the fish over the bread. Henry turned green as he gagged, then threw the sandwich at Mike. Mike retaliated by launching a spoonful of potato salad at his brother. While all this was going on, Emma leaned close to Julie. Imbeciles, she whispered into Julie's ear. Never forget that men are imbeciles. It was because of the phone calls, however, that Julie had one beer more than she usually did. It was exactly what she needed today, she thought, and with the hazy logic of someone whose world is slightly spinning, she tried to force her fears away. Maybe the calls were Richard's version of a temper tantrum. Maybe he was mad because of the way she had talked to him when he had called about his glasses. She remembered that she had been pretty rough on him. Granted, he had deserved it, but it couldn't have been easier for him to hear. But because he hadn't shown up yet to pick them up from the salon, she guessed she had been right in thinking that the whole thing had been a ruse to see her again. The phone calls were his way of letting her know he was upset that his plan hadn't worked out. And she remembered herself again. The calls had stopped 2 days ago. Not a long hiatus, but then they hadn't been going on that long in the first place. It was probably over. God, you find your way home. Welcome. Juba, what's up? How you doing? Good to see you, my brother. It was probably over, she thought, as if trying to reassure herself. Despite what Emma might think, she was taking this seriously. Being homeless as a teenager, however briefly, had left her with a healthy sense of paranoia. Until she was certain the calls had really stopped, she wasn't going to do anything stupid. No late evening walks alone. She'd keep the doors locked. She kept Singer in the bedroom with her on those nights that Mike wasn't there. She'd be extra careful. Julie crossed her arms and listened to the water by mid-afternoon. Emma had slipped in a Jimmy Buffett CD and slipped in a Jimmy Buffett CD and the music was playing loud. They had lifted anchor and were passing Cape Lookout as they headed back towards Parker's Island. The boat was moving in rhythm with the gentle swells, and Emma was cuddling up with Henry as he stared, nibbling occasionally at his ear. Mike was cleaning up at the stern, putting the tackle back in the box and making sure the reels were secured. Julie stood near the bow again, feeling the wind move her hair. Like Mike, she had burnt a little, and the skin on her shoulders were tender to the touch. So were the various other parts she had missed when applying the sunscreen: the top of her left ear, her forehead near the hairline, a swath along her thigh, and another on her shin. Amazing, she thought, how the sun had found those spots and taken its revenge. I looked like a pink spotted cheetah, she said. Though the weather, the weather remained glorious, it was time to head home. Emma and Henry had faced a small mutiny earlier that morning, complete with tears and screams because their kids couldn't guilty. They had promised to take them out later for pizza and a movie. Mike had to be at the Clipper by 8. Didn't plan on heading in to see him play until around 10 or so. And she wanted to take a nap before then. She was brushed. The bear and sun had made her woozy. She went to her she went to her gear bag and threw on a shirt. It was as she was pulling on her shorts and glancing toward the beach that her eyes registered something wrong. Even a closer look wasn't enough to make it obvious right away. Shielding her eyes from the sun, she scanned the boats, then the water's edge, then the people on the shore. It was there. Somewhere it was there. And whatever it was, it didn't fit. Frowning, Julie looked closer still, then finally realized what had snagged her attention. And she was right. It didn't fit. No, not on the hot day at the beach. She lowered her hand, puzzled. Someone wearing jeans and a dark blue shirt was standing near the dunes, holding what? Binoculars? A telescope definitely focused on the boat, on her. He was holding and for an instant, she almost convinced herself that she was mistaken. But then, as if knowing exactly what she was thinking, the person waved, his arm moving slowly back and forth like a pendulum of a grandfather's clock. I'm here, he seemed to be saying. I'm always here. Richard. She felt the blood drain from her face, and she inhaled sharply, stifling part, but not all of the sound, with the back of her hand. But when she blinked, Richard was gone. She moved to the bowl and leaned forward. Nothing, no sign of him anywhere. It was as if he had never been there at all. Mike had heard her and reached her side a moment later. What is it? He asked. Julie was still staring towards the beach. Mike's eyes followed hers. And after finding no sign of Richard, no sign of anything unusual, Julie curled beneath his arm. I don't know. It had to be an illusion, she thought. It couldn't have been real. No one could have moved. Mike brought Julie home and was still in the driveway unloading her things when she went inside. Singer followed her, and when she put her purse on the kitchen counter, he balanced on his two back legs to greet her. She was trying to find out. She was trying to fend off his lapping tongue when she noticed the answering machine was blinking. She pushed Singer away, and their feet met the floor. He padded towards the living room and out the door, probably to visit. A fly was playing against the window, buzzing in anger. She heard none of it, nor could she hear Mike or Singer, or even the sounds of her own breathing. Instead, in the kitchen, the only thing she noticed was the machine. The blinking was ominous, hypnotic. Play me, it seemed to be saying. Play me. For an instant, the floor seemed unsteady, and Julie found herself on the boat again, looking towards the beach. He had waved at her, she thought. He had been watching her, and now he had called to tell her about it. She shook her head. No, that wasn't it. It. He wasn't there. He was never there. It had been a mirage. Her eyes had been playing tricks, a couple of one or two many beers, and a case of the jitters. In the kitchen, the machine kept blinking. Come on, Julie thought. Get a hold of yourself. Anyone could have left a message. So what's the big deal? That's the reason I have the machine in the first place. So just head over there and press the button. As soon as I do, I'll find out Mabel or another friend that called. Or it's someone calling for an appointment. Or someone wanting me to subscribe to one magazine or another. Or to support the local United Way. Press the doggone button, Julie, and see how ridiculous this is. Yet moving to the phone was almost impossible. Her stomach was knotted up. Her legs were stiff. She reached the machine and got her hand up, then hesitated, her finger resting on the button. Play me. She grew breathing hard. She couldn't deny that as brave and logical as she had tried to be, as much as she had tried to convince herself that she was blowing this out of proportion, fear was getting the best of her. Please, she thought, let there be no messages filled with nothing. Let me hear a voice, any voice, but his. With a trembling hand, she pressed the button. At first, there was nothing but silence, and she found herself holding her breath. Then, faintly, came the sound of someone whispering, a whisper impossible to identify. As she leaned slower to the machine to make out the voice, she listened, concentrating hard. And just as she was reaching for the delete button to erase it, she recognized the message. She recognized the message itself. Her eyes grew wide, as she heard the chorus of a song, a tune she knew by heart, a tune from the evening in Buford with Mike 2 weeks ago. Bye bye, Miss American Pie. Ah, Arlene, how are you doing, sis? Good to see you. All right, Richard is doing way too much, I think. Julie's cries brought Mike running inside. She stood beside the she stood beside the machine, her face white as she hit the delete button over and over and over again. When she heard the words, she was trembling as images raced through her mind, one right after the next, leaving her nauseated. Richard had been at the beach today. She was making the call. There wasn't the slightest doubt. Hadn't stopped at just those things. He had also been watching them in Buford. He had stayed out of sight while she and Mike had dinner. He had seen them take the walk in the park, and he had been close by, close enough to know the song that Mike had sung to her. For all she knew, he had been the one who had bought their drinks afterwards. He had also called the night Mike had stayed over, and she knew with sinking certainty that he had been watching her in the cemetery. He had been everywhere. That can't be happening, she thought as her throat constricted. But it was. Everything seemed suddenly terribly wrong. The kitchen was too bright. The curtains were open. The windows looked over the wood. The windows looked over the wooded lots where anyone could hide. Where is he hiding? Shadows stretched into darkness, and as clouds began to roll overhead, the world took on a grayness, like an old horror movie filmed in black and white. If he had been watching her today, if he had been watching her always, he was probably watching her now. In the yard, Stinger lifted his nose and barked. Julie jumped, feeling her heart begin to hammer, and she turned into Mike, burying her face in his chest, just as the tears started to flow. People like that don't stop, Emma had said. Julie, come on, tell me what happened. Mike pleaded, what's going on? Her voice was cracked and faint when she finally answered, I'm scared. I'm really scared, she said. Julie was, and that was out of the question now. Of course, there wasn't a chance she was going to sleep. And there wasn't the remotest possibility that she was going to stay at her house alone while Mike went to the clipper. Mike had offered to back out of the show, but she didn't want him to. Sure, sure that they would just sit around at home, rehashing the affair all night long. No need to read was an escape. A night on the town, some loud music, and a few more bears, and she'd be good as new. Back to the same old me, she thought. As if that's going to be possible, the little voice inside her said skeptically. Julie frowned. Okay, so it probably wasn't going to work, but obsessing about it certainly wouldn't work. And she was not going to stay home, and she was not going to think about it, she told herself, other than to figure out just what she was going to do from here on. She'd always believed that people came in two varieties, those who took out the windshield and those who stared in the rearview mirror. She'd always been the windshield type, got to focus on the future, not the past, because that is the only part that's still up for grabs. Mom throws me out. Gotta get some food and find a place to sleep. Husband dies. Gotta keep working, or I'll end up going crazy. Got some guy stalking me. Gotta figure out a way to stop it. In the car with Mike, she steeled herself. Julie Baronson, she thought. A take charge kind of gal. The puffing up worked for a moment before her shoulders sagged. Yeah, right, she thought. It wasn't going to be that easy this time because this is the scenario wasn't finished yet. And the future is kind of hard to concentrate on when the past isn't quite done. Right now, she was stuck in the present, and it wasn't a good feeling at all. Despite the brave act she was putting on, she was scared, even more scared than when she had been living on the streets. There, she had been able to find a way to stay invisible, survival by hiding, she had called it, which was pretty much the opposite of what was happening with Richard. The problem now was that she was too visible and she couldn't do a thing about it. When Mike parked on the street in front of his place, she found herself looking over her shoulders and straining to hear anything out of the ordinary. The darkened spaces between the houses didn't do much for her nerves, nor did the rustling, which turned out to be a stray cat poking through the garbage. And the questions that plagued her, oh, the questions, those were doozies for the nerves, weren't they? What did he want? What was he going to do next? For a moment, she imagined herself lying in bed at night with the room black, and when her eyes adjusted to the darkness, realizing he was there in the room with her. He'd be standing beside the bed, his eyes the only thing visible through the mask. Something in his hand as he approached her. Oh my God, that's terrifying. Julie shook that last image from her mind. Let's not get carried away. That's not going to happen. She was not going to let that happen. Mike wasn't going to let that happen either. No way. Not a chance. But what to do? She wished she hadn't deleted the message. In fact, she wished she hadn't deleted any of the messages, since they were the only proof she had that something was actually happening. The police might have been able to do something about them, but they couldn't do something anyway, couldn't they? Julie thought about that, coming to the same conclusion she had shared with Emma. Oh, she could try, of course, but even with the new stalking laws, without proof, there was nothing the police could do. She'd end up sitting across from the same pudgy, overworked officer who would tap his pencil against the pad, waiting for her to provide concrete evidence. What did he say on the first messages? Nothing. Was he ever threatened? Has he ever threatened you? No. Have you ever seen him following you? No, except on the beach. But you could be sure it was him, right? He was too far away, right? If the person was whispering on the last message, how do you know it was Richard? I can't prove it, but I know it was him. Long pause. Uh-huh. Well, is there anything else? No, except that I've got a major case of the willies, and I'd like to be able to take a shower without imagining Norman Bates on the other side of the curtain. Another tap of the pencil. Ha ha! Even to her, it sounded far-fetched. Thinking it was him did Thinking it was him didn't make it him. But it was Richard. She was absolutely sure of it, wasn't she? At the clicker, Julie took a seat at the bar alongside a few other men who had come earlier to watch a baseball game. Julie ordered a beer and was nursing it slowly as 8 o'clock came and went. The television was turned off and the people at the bar left. After the band had checked the amplifiers and tuned their instruments, they went backstage to relax. Mike joined Julie. They made an appointment of not talking about what had happened, which was, she thought, a lot like talking about it. When it got right down to it, but Julie could see the anger in Mike's eyes. when he finally told her that he was needed on stage. Jojo, what's up? I'll be watching, he said. But that point, but by that point, a few people had wandered up to the bar. Others had seated themselves at tables, and still others had congregated in small groups. By 9:30, when the music started, even more people had arrived, and there was a steady stream coming in the door. People were crowding the bar to order drinks, but Julie ignored them, thankful that the noise and atmosphere were at least partially drowning out the endless questions. Still, she turned reflectively towards the door whenever it opened, afraid of seeing Richard. People entered, but Richard didn't. The hours passed in steady rhythm. First 10, then 11, then midnight. And for the first time since that afternoon, Julie felt herself regaining a bit of control. And like Mike, with that feeling came anger. More than anything, she wanted to give Richard a verbal lashing in public, the kind of high volume tirade that included being pointed four fingers being poked into his chest. Just who do you think you are? She imagined herself screaming at him. Do you honestly think I'm going to put up with this crap for another minute? Another poke. I've put up with too much in my life. I've survived too much in my life to let you get the better of me. I will not, I repeat, I will not let you ruin my life. Do you think I'm some patsy? Another pope. Some women tremble, just waiting for you to make the next move? Hell no. Poke again. It's time to get on with your life, Mr. Richard Franklin. The best man won. I'm so sorry, pal, but you weren't him. As a matter of fact, you never, by cheering as dozens of women spontaneously jumped up and applauded. Julie's imagination is getting the better of her. While she was envisioning her revenge, a group of young men wedged in next to her, ordering drinks for themselves and others in their group who couldn't get close enough. Their order took a few minutes, and when they left, she glanced off to the side. Halfway down the bar, she saw a familiar figure leaning towards the bartender to order a drink. Richard. His image was like a blow to the solar plexus, and all those devastating combats were forgotten. He was there. He followed her. Again. Oh, it's the morning, huh? Happy Sunday morning to you, my sister. Mike had seen Richard coming a minute earlier and wanted to jump off the stage to head him off, but he forced himself to keep playing. Richard had seen Mike as well. He nodded to him with a smirk before making his way to the middle of the bar, pretending not to notice that Julie was there. You can shove that nod where the half moons meet, Mike thought, feeling the adrenaline kicking again. One wrong move and this guitar will be rammed right up there as well. Julie could see him. She could feel him. The sensation like heavy breath inside the crowded elevator. He did nothing. He neither looked her way nor made any move towards her. Instead, he stood with his back to the bar, scanning the crowd with a drink in his hand, looking just like any of the other men in the place, as if he honestly believed she'd think his whole thing was a coincidence. Screw you, Julie thought. You can't hear me. The band started another song, and she glanced towards Mike. His face was tight, his eyes flashing a warning, and she nodded. Suddenly in dire need of a drink, a rare drink, something served straight up and swallowed in a single motion. In the dim light, Richard's profile was shadowed, one leg crossed over the other, and for an instant she thought she saw his mouth form an amused smile, as if he knew she was watching him. Her mouth, she realized, had gone dry. Who am I kidding? She suddenly thought. He scared the hell out of me. But it was time to end this. Without knowing where she found the guts to do what came next, Julie rose and started towards him. Richard turned when she was close, his expression opening up as if he were pleasantly surprised to see her. Julie, he said, I don't know. I didn't know you would be here. How are you? Cut it out, will you? She said it loud enough for others nearby to turn. Excuse me, he said. You know exactly what I'm talking about. No, I don't. You followed me here. What? By now, even more people had turned to watch, and Julie felt the words she had rehearsed coming back to her. From the stage, Mike was watching with frantic intensity, and the moment the song ended, he started towards them, letting his guitar fall to the stage. You think you can just follow me around, and I'm just going to take it? Julie demanded, her voice rising. Richard held up his hand. Julie, hold on. I don't know what you're talking about. You picked the wrong girl to try to scare. And if you keep this up, I'll call the police and get a restraining order. I'll have you locked up. You think you can call my house and leave messages like you did? I didn't leave any messages. Julie was screaming now, and people were words sparked between them. By now, a half a circle had formed around them, and they had moved a step back, as if expecting this to fly. Julie, meanwhile, was on a roll, living the fantasy she realized was even better than imagining it. That's right, you go, girl, and get away with it. Did you think I wouldn't notice you watching me today? Richard took a step backwards. This is the first time I'm seeing you. I was at the site all day, lost in their emotions. This, put up with what? Just talk. You hear me? I want you to just talk. Richard looked towards the faces surrounding them, shrugging as if trying to enlist their sympathy. It's over. Do you understand that? Mike pushed his way through the crowd at that moment. Julie's face was red, but she looked scared, and for an instant, Richard's eyes met Mike. In the briefest of flashes, invisible unless one was looking at it, Mike recognized the same smirk on Richard's face that he had seen rage and defiance, as if daring Mike to do something about it. That was all his head into Richard's chest like a football player making an open-hand tackle. The momentum momentarily lifted Richard from the floor and sent his upper torso crashing onto the bar. Bottles and glasses shattered on the ground, and screams broke out in the crowd. Mike grabbed Richard by the collar and cocked his arm, and though Richard's hands went up, he was off balance, which allowed Mike's first punch to connect with his cheek. Richard crashed into the bar again and was holding onto it to keep from falling. When his head came up, more slowly this time, there was a gash beneath his eye. Mike hit him again. Richard's head whipped sideways. It looked almost as if the events were happening in slow motion, as Richard hit a stool and bounced off, tumbling until he fell to the house. Mike was set to lunge again when a few men reached over to restrain him. The fight had lasted less than 15 seconds. Mike struggled to free himself before he realized the people behind him were holding him, not so that Richard could have his chance, but because they were worried Richard might be hurt even further. As soon as they let him go, Julie took his hand and let it out, not to try to stop him. The amazing Emma, we are on chapter 27 of this book. Yep, The Guardian. Once outside, once outside, Mike lead the game to tailgate, trying to collect himself. Give me just a minute, he said. You okay? Julie asked. Mike brought his hands to his face and exhaled, speaking through his fingers. I'm fine, just crashing a little. Julie moved closer, tugging at his shirt. That side of you that I haven't seen before. But you should know that I was handling okay on my own. I could see that, but the look he gave me really set me off. What look? Mike described it, and Julie shivered. I didn't see that, she said. I don't think you were meant to, but I guess it's finally over now. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Behind them, a few people had stepped outside and were staring in their direction. Julie's thoughts, however, were elsewhere. What had been at the title said them, but the words were coming back now. I hope so, she said. It's over, Mike said again. Julie smiled briefly, but she was clearly distracted. He paused. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. You didn't really expect him to admit it, did you? I don't know. I guess I didn't expect him to. I didn't expect him to say anything. You are still you are still sure it was him though, aren't you? Yeah, I'm sure. She paused. At least I think I'm sure. He reached for her hand. It was him. I saw it. It was him. I saw it in his face. Julie stared at the ground. Okay, she said. Mike squeezed her hand. Come on, Julie. You don't want me to start worrying that I just beat up a guy for nothing, do you? He's the one. Trust me. He is. And if he does anything else, I'll go to the police and tell them everything that happened. We'll get a restraining order. We'll press charges. We'll do whatever it takes. Besides, if he was, not even get so close without saying hello. You were only a few feet away. Julie closed her eyes. He's right, she thought. He's absolutely right. Richard wouldn't have gone there. Hadn't he said he didn't like it? No, he was there because he had seen them go in. He had known they would be there because he had watched them. And of course, he would lie about it. If he had done anything else, just this side of cycle. But why had he let himself be seen this time? And what did that mean? Despite maybe I should go to the pretty a bad idea. Will you go with me? Of course. Mike reached up and touched his face. So, are you feeling better? Just a little. Still scared, but better now. Mike ran his finger over her cheek before leaning in to kiss her. I told you I wasn't going to let anything happen to you, and I'm not, okay? He, his touch made her skin tingle. Okay. In the bar, Richard was finally able to get to his feet. Among the first to reach him was Andrea. She had seen Mike jump from the stage and began pushing his way through the crowd. The guy she was dancing with, another winner, she acknowledged, though the next car was kind of sexy, grabbed her hand and said, "Come on, fight." They followed the path Mike had taken, and though they were too late to see the fight start or end, she did see Julie leading Mike away by the hand, while Richard used the lower rungs of the stool to pull himself up. He was being helped by others, and as spectators rehearsed what had happened, she caught the gist of what went on. He just attacked the guy. This guy was minding his own business when this lady started screaming at him, and then this other dude barged in. He wasn't doing anything. Andrea saw the gash on his cheek, the blood at the corner of his mouth, and stopped chewing her gum. She couldn't believe it. She had never heard Mike so much as raise his voice, let alone attack someone, but never something violent like this. But the proof was right here in front of her. Richard was right in front of her, and as he staggered to his feet, her next move registered at once. "He's hurt. He needs me." She cast off the guy she had been dancing with and practically lunged towards Richard. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" Richard looked at her without answering, and when he wobbled, Andrea reached out, slipping her arm around him. Not an ounce of fat on him, she noticed. "What happened?" she asked, feeling flushed. "He came up and hit me," Richard said. "But why?" "I don't know." He wobbled again, and Andrea felt him lean on her. His, his arm slipped over her shoulder. Muscles there too, she noted. "You need to sit down for a minute. Here, let me help you." They took a tentative step, and the crowd started to part. Andrea liked that. It seemed almost as if they were in the final scene of a movie, just before the credits rolled. She had just begun batting her eyes for effect when Leaning Joe, hobbling on his prosthetic leg, suddenly showed up to help Richard as well. "Come on," he barked. "I'm the owner here. We need to talk." He began leading Richard to the table, and when he suddenly changed direction, Andrea was jostled to the side and Richard were talking over a small table. From across the bar, he, her moment ruined. Andrea pouted as she watched them. By the time her day came back to her side, she had already decided what she had to do. Yard food, bless up your nice clean self, how you doing? All in all, it was a day that Julie would rather not remember. Sure, it was good to test the engines, so to speak. She had pretty much gone through every emotion possible since she had crawled out of bed that morning, and every single one seemed to be in fine working order. Overall, she thought, if she were ranking the days, this one would have been number one in fight. By passing the first night, she had slept beneath a highway overpass in Daytona. Number three in Despondence, the day Jim died, and the funeral still occupied the first two slots in that sorry category. And number one is overall exhaustion. Throw in a smattering of love, anger, tears, laughter, surprise, relief, and the day-long push and pull of worry when imagining what would come next. And it was definitely a day she'd remember for a long, long time. Coffee ground into the filler. He had been quiet in the car and was still quiet now. He had asked for aspirin as soon as they got home and had chewed 4 tablets before filling a glass of water to wash them down. Julie sat at the table. Singer chose that moment to lean against her until she gave him her attention. That, no doubt in his mind, had been in relatively short supply lately. Mac was definitely right. The whole thing must have been planned. And not only that, Richard had anticipated how she would react. He must have. His answers, his lies, had come the other way, and Richard had put up no fight at all. Those things still bothered her, especially she decided the last, the last one. Something didn't quite make sense there. Even if Mike had had the element of surprise, it hadn't been that much surprise. She had seen Mike coming. She had seen Mike coming and had time to move out of the way. But not only hadn't Richard fought, he hadn't moved at all. If Richard had known what she would do, wouldn't he also have known how Mike would have reacted? Or at least had an inkling? So why hadn't he been scared? And why didn't he feel as if he had planned? You sure that's a nasty bump? Leaving Joe said. He and Richard were standing just inside the door of the pickup. Richard shook his head. I just want to go home. I'd be happy to call an ambulance for you, he offered. To Richard, he seemed as if he were really saying, please don't sue me. It's okay, Richard said. Tired of the old man, he pushed through the door and stepped into the darkness. Scanning the parking lot, he noted that the police had already left. The rest of the parking lot was quiet as well, and he started making his way to his car. Has he a pal, Richard? She said. Richard hesitated before answering. Hello, Andrea. Andrea raised her chin slightly and met his eyes. You feeling any better? Richard shrugged. After a moment, Andrea cleared her throat. I know this might sound odd, considering what happened tonight, but would you mind giving me a lift home? Richard glanced around. Again, he saw no one. What about your date? She nodded towards the clipper. He's still inside. I told him I was going to the bathroom. Richard raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. In the silence, Andrea took a step towards him, touched the booth. Please, she whispered. How about we go someplace else instead? She tilted her head, as if wondering what he meant. He smiled. Trust me. In Julie's kitchen, the coffee maker was gurgling as Mike sat at the table. What are you thinking? He asked. What What are you thinking of? Julie, he asked again. That everything that happened tonight seems wrong somehow, she thought, knowing that Mike would do his best to convince her she had misinterpreted it. However, she kept her answer vague. Just going through it all again. It keeps replaying in my mind, you know. Yeah, for me too. The coffee maker beeped, and Mike got up from the table and poured 2 cups. Singer's ears lifted, and Julie watched as he made his way through the living room. In their haste to leave earlier, she hadn't drawn the shades, and she knew a car was coming down the street. There wasn't that much traffic at that time of night, and she watched to see if she recognized one of the neighbors coming home after an evening on the town. Singer went toward the window as the light began to intensify, but instead of watching the sky fade to black, again as the car whizzed by, she saw the beams from the headlights solidify. Moths and insects drawn towards the glow made the beams look as if they were composed of swirling fingers. Singer barked and began growling. The glow of headlights remained steady. The car, she could tell, was idling in the road, and she sat up in the chair. She heard the engine rev, and suddenly the lights switched off. A car door slammed. He was there, Julie thought. Richard had come to the house. Mike looked towards the window. Singer's growls grew louder, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Mike put a hand on Julie's shoulder and took a tentative step towards the door. Singer was barking and growling steadily now as Mike moved forward. Singer went wild then, and in the fury came something unexpected. The sound was at once normal and startling, and Mike paused, as if trying to decide what he had heard for real. Then it came again. Someone they realized was knocking on the door. I wonder if it's the police. Mike turned towards Julie as if asking, huh? He peeked out the window, and Julie saw his shoulders drop. When he glanced at her again, there was a look of relief on his face. He patted Singer's back and said, it's okay. And Singer stopped growling. He followed Mike. However, later, Julie saw two police officers standing on the porch. It seems like all of these books are the same. OMG. It's like there is a writing club and these people use the same scenarios. Remember when we read that other book, Twice in a Lifetime? Remember that lady's son Tommy? His son Tommy, he was always giving trouble. The police were always coming up. OMG. Are the police there to arrest him for assault? Let's see. Officer Jenny, Officer Jennifer Roma, Romanello was new in town, new on the job, and looking far away from the guy she was working with. After doing the majority of her police training in Jacksonville, she had moved to Swansboro less than a month earlier. She had been riding with Pete Sandy for 2 weeks now and had 4 weeks to go. All rookies are to work with an experienced officer during their first 6 weeks on the ropes again. She thought she'd strangle him. Pete Candy turned the key, shutting off the engine, and glanced over at her. Let me handle this, he said. You are still learning the ropes. Or, though she had said it, Pete missed the tone, and she could see him flexing his arm. Pete took his biceps very seriously. He also would like to look at himself in the rearview mirror before he went into action. No, come on up. Just let me do the talking. And make sure to keep your eyes open, kid, okay? He said this as though he were old enough to be her father. In reality, he had been on the force only 2 years. And despite the fact that Swansboro wasn't exactly a hotbed of high-profile criminal activity, Pete was Pete had developed a theory that the mafia had started infiltrating the town, and darned if he wasn't going to be the one to handle it. Pete's all-time favorite movie was Serpico. It was the reason he had joined the force. Jennifer closed her eyes. Why, of all the idiots, did I get stuck with this guy? Whatever you say. Mike Harris, Officer Gandhi said. Pete Gandhi had put on the I know the uniform intimidates you pose, and Jennifer fought the urge to slap the back of his head. She knew that Pete had been acquainted with both Mike and Julie for years. In the car, he mentioned that Mike serviced his car and he got his hair cut at the salon. He hadn't even needed to look up Julie's address. Life in a small town, she sighed. For a gal who grew up in the Bronx, this was a whole new world, and she was still getting used to it. Oh, hey Pete, Mike said. What can I do for you? Can we come in for a minute? We need to talk to you. Sure, he said. They hesitated, and Mike glanced down at Singer. Don't worry about him. He'll be fine. The officer stepped into the living room, and Mike motioned over his shoulder with his thumb. Can I get you some coffee? I just made a pot. No, thank you. We are not allowed to drink on the job. Jennifer rolled her eyes, thinking, that only goes for booze, you little puss. By then, Julie had come out of the kitchen and was standing a few feet back, her arms crossed. Singer went to her side and sat. What's this all about, Pete? She asked. Officer Pete Gandhi didn't like being called Pete while wearing the uniform, and for a moment he wasn't sure how to react to the familiarity. He cleared his throat. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I feel that way. Like when I'm at work, I have some friends at work who, we are friends associates outside, and we talk to each other. We say, we call each other by our first name, but I am not a fan, if you know what I mean, of being called by my first name in the professional setting. I don't like it. I don't like. Some people don't mind. They introduce themselves to somebody and they say, "Oh, I am Olive," and I introduce myself. No, I'm not gonna introduce you and say, "Oh, I'm Trev." No, we're not like that. We're not on those terms. Uh-uh. And also, whenever I always make it a point of my duty, whenever I meet somebody, even if we are friends outside, and I call you by your first name, when I step into your professional setting where you work, I would never dare to call you by your first name. It's going to show familiarity, and if there are other people looking around, they're going to see it as, well, this is our friend. If they are on a first name basis, if something were to happen, she would pick up for her friend. You know what I mean? Yes. Yes. So I try my best not to do that. By then, Julia come out of the kitchen and was standing a few feet back, her arms crossed. Singer went to her side and sat. What's this all about, Pete? He asked. Officer Pete Gandhi didn't like being called Pete while he was wearing his uniform, and for a moment he wasn't sure how to react to the familiarity. He cleared his throat. Were you at the sailing clipper this evening, Mike? Yeah, I played with the Orcacoke Inlet. Pete glanced towards Jennifer, as if showing her how it was done. Oh, big scoop, she thought. Only 1 million people verified that fact already. And were you involved in an altercation with one Mr. Richard Franklin? Before Mike could answer, Julie stepped into the living room. What's going on? He asked. Pete Gandhi lived for this moment. Next to pulling his gun, this was far and away the best part of the job, even if he was doing this to someone he knew. Duty was duty, after all, and if he let the little thing slide, before he knew it, Swansboro would be the murder capital of the world. In the last month alone, he had issued a dozen tickets for jaywalking and another dozen for littering. Well, sir, I hate to do this to you, but I've got a number of witnesses who say you tackled Mr. Franklin without provocation. That's assault, and it's against the law. 2 minutes later, Mike was being led away in the squad car. OM Jesus. Okay, so Mike is being arrested for that assault, and it makes me scared because now Julie is going to be there by herself. And I'm wondering if you're any of you wondering whether or not it is really Richard. You think it's really Richard who is spying on Julie? Do you think it is really him? I don't know. Having dealt with narcissists, I'm not so quick to throw in the towels and say, "Oh, it's not him." No, I feel that it is him. But now he's going to become the victim because after all, um, Mike did hit him. So he's going to play up the victim card, and then when it comes up about the phone calls and him watching them and all of that, it, this is going to dilute that occasion. So he is going to be the victim, and the tables are going to suddenly turn on Mike and Julie. That is something. But that is how a narcissist, if you allow a narcissist to get the better of you, when they get the better, you gotta be able to hold your temper. You gotta be able to have a sharp eye, keep a keen lookout for whatever they are doing, anything they are saying. You gotta do that. If you don't do that, you're going to find yourself in a predicament like Mike has just found himself. All right, that's going to be the end of the reading for tonight. I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the live. I sincerely appreciate you all. Now, it's almost 7:30. Now, Angie, hi, Angie, how you doing? Angie, we wear the dress today. I never saw the dress on the live earlier. The dress you said I should wear on the live. I'm wearing it right now, Sister Andrea. Sister Angie, I'm wearing it right now. Yeah, how are you doing, my love? Good to see you. Thank you so much for popping in just as I am about to pop out. Just as I am about to pop out, my love. Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate you. All right. So, guys, that's where we're going to end for tonight. May I go downstairs now? May I go, may I have one curtain rod to go put up and stuff. You know? Yeah, maybe show on what me I do when me downstairs and I do what me I do. Yeah, maybe show on. I'll show you all because me I go down there right now. So that's going to be it from me for today, for tonight, my friends, at the end of the reading. We will talk later. Until next time, my friends. This is Trip from Travested, where your journey matters. I'll see you all later, guys.